So now at this juncture, let me introduce to you guys our next speaker. He is an assistant professor of fine arts at the University of the Philippines, Cebu, teaching art history, theory and criticism, art management, and product design courses. Since 2018, he has been the curator and director of the Jose T. Hoya Gallery at UP Cebu and the coordinator of the Office for Initiatives in Culture and the Arts, UP Cebu. He finished his fine arts undergraduate degree from the University of San Carlos in Cebu City and completed his Master's of Arts in Art Studies, Art Theory, and Criticism degree from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, with a thesis on the life and times of the Cebuano muralist Raimundo Francia and his extant ceiling paintings in the heritage churches of Cebu and Bohol. As an artist, curator, and researcher, his interest includes Cebuano art and design history, contemporary art and design practices in Cebu, Philippine Baroque art, queer art, and issues in heritage conservation. Under Hora's direction, the University of the Philippines Cebu Museum of Art and Culture was launched, which aims to preserve and promote the rich creative traditions of Cebu and its neighboring islands. Everyone, give a round of applause to Mr. J. Nathan T. Hore.
Thank you, Dai. Okay. Mayong buntag na tong tanan. Okay, Murag. I'm very happy to be here, up on stage. Sa una, kafa student ko diri. Maglingkod rami din ha. Listening to people talking up here on stage. Karon kita na yung istorya, no? It's a kind of a surreal feeling to be up here on stage. So I'll be discussing a bit of Western art history about the relationship between food and its intersection in the culture of daily life, and then focus into Philippine art history, and then go down to representative works in Cebuano art. I'll be presenting a paper on visualizing appetite, the intersection of food and art in Cebuano culture. As a cornerstone of our very existence, food has always played a significant part in our social and cultural lifestyles. Thus, it is no wonder that the depiction of food in art spans across cultures and all of recorded human history. Appearing in myriad contexts, this practice stretches back to ancient Greece and Rome, where banquets were consuming passions celebrated in literature, painting, and mosaics. Okay, next slide. And if you go into social media, like every one of us would now be taking photos of our food, breakfast, lunch, snacks, and then post it in Instagram. And then we have this list of hashtags where we can, when we share our posts on food. This fascination, this contemporary fascination of food through photos has already been a practice since the during the earlier civilizations, and we begin with some works from the Roman period. This is the fresco paintings in the burial sites of the Egyptians. The funerary offerings that accompany the deceased on their voyage to the next life includes frescoes painted on tomb walls featuring a range of food, figs, bread, meat, and grapes. And if you're familiar with Egyptian culture, these would be served in the afterlife. Next slide. And the Romans, especially the discovery of the Roman villas after the eruption of Vitruvius, Pompeii, the city of Pompeii, we've seen how the houses were decorated with food, decorated with fruits and vegetables in their walls and in different parts of the houses. And here you can see the Romans decorating their walls and floors with paintings and mosaics depicted to food, dedicated to food. Asarotos ikos or unswept floor, mosaics were cleverly designed to look like remains of a banquet. So ang ilahang mga sawg didto na trumploy nga fooling your eye as if they're actual objects on the floor, but they are meant to suggest the kind of festivity that the house of the host could give, like the kinds of parties that they give to guests. And then next, in the Middle Ages, however, the domination of Christian perspective that left no artistic room for simple pleasures, but food still occasionally made its way onto the art menu. So makita nimo ang differences sa art or sa paintings nga na-produce during the Middle Ages nga very kanang sana ang ilahang depiction sa mga banquets and feast, mga controlled kaayo or sa tawag ana kanang restraint ang ilahang depictions of these kinds of celebrations. And also during the Middle Ages, food were used sometimes as allegories to explain the Bible. For example, an apple became the metaphor for Adam and Eve's original sin. So after ana, maminaw ka sa biblical story, nakaganahan mo kaon og apple. And then of course, from the Romans, Egyptians, and the Middle Ages came the Renaissance. And we are very familiar with the story of the Renaissance with our humanities classes. But the Renaissance brought with it a period of humanistic thinking and an interest in the natural world, which began to pave the way for still life to become a separate genre. So they begin to depict, to paint inanimate objects of everyday life vis-a-vis the penchant to paint or to depict the mysterious mythology, religious themes, historical themes. Next slide. Moral and religious lessons remained during this time, as in this work by Peter Artsen with the biblical scene in the background. So bisag mo paint na sila og sugod og mga objects of everyday life, they inject still scenes from the Bible and from the dogmas of the church. And then finally, during the Baroque period, you're familiar with the work of Caravaggio. In 1596, Caravaggio painted the basket of fruit. This apparently simple painting wrote a new page in the history of art. For the very first time, still life had been given the same formal and interpretative dignity as a human portrait or a religious story. So, kini nga particular painting of Caravaggio was a very important piece because here that the Romans, that the Italians started to appreciate objects of everyday life, and painters and artists started to pay attention to things, ordinary things that they use and every day of their lives. Dili na ni shift siya away from the Michelangelo Sistine Chapel, the birth of Venus of Fra Lippi, and the other grand masters, the genius of Renaissance art. And now you have a basket of fruit as a subject. And then, but food as a subject of art reached its peak in the 17th century Holland when still life painting became a favorite subject. As the Catholic Church lost influence, especially during the Reformation and Protestant Reformation, artists like Clara Peters and William Calf used their still lives to portray the power of an empire that became rich on international trade and colonial plunder. So kining mga lami kay tan-awon nga mga paintings for the Europeans were actually pictures of power. Appetite for power is seen in how these objects are arranged and being depicted in an idea of abundance, of sumptuousness, But behind it is, if you want uh, to interpret in a critical way, then you know the story of colonialism and how the colonial kanang countries, ay tawag na mga colonial, the colonies were being depicted in the paintings of these European painters. And you can see actually here ware, China ware, nga gi-trade to Europe, and the kind of food being exchanged, the exoticism of the East, nga gida ang mga goods to the West. And the paintings were actually very good documentation of this period in history. In these works, next slide, Chinese porcelain, exotic fruits, and imported citruses jostle lobsters on delicate fabrics or form part of mouth-watering banquets. Still life painting became the perfect means for Dutch society to demonstrate its power. Next slide. So di ba lami kay sila tan-awon, no? And next slide. And then the luxury of Flemish and Dutch still life paintings contrasted with the more sober style of their Spanish counterparts. Remember that this period in Western history, ang Spain, dugay na siya nakaabot sa Renaissance compared sa Italians o sa other European countries because kanang Moro wars nila sa Iberian Peninsula. And that's what the kind of thinking nga naabot diri sa during the colonial years nga murag grabe kita heightened ang atong spiritual fervors nga i-compare nimo at the same time with the ones in Italy, in Germany, in other European countries. Mas liberated na sila, but this painting is a testament to that period wherein there's a kind of soberness and austerity in the expression of Spanish culture, which actually is seen here compared to the Flemish still life paintings. It's seen here in the works of Juan Sanchez Cotan. So-called, ang kaning works ni Cotan is now called the Lent still life, compared nimo sa Easterly, the more lavish Flemish paintings. And then, yes, another Cotan painting. Artists like Francesco de Goya use still life to explain the violence of war. Images showing dead animals now spoke more of the horrors of death than the joys of living. And eventually, still life painting, especially food in still life painting, became now a means to actually critique the kinds of political situations especially in Spain at that time. Familiar man siguro mo Cinco de Mayo painting ni Goya. And then Goya used still life and food to further his advocacy of critiquing the Spanish wars. And then we come to the Philippines exploration of food and visual arts. And of course, still life as a genre became a favorite subject by Filipino painters, especially with the opening of the Fine Arts School in UP Diliman. And Western academic painting was taught. And of course, still life was one of the subjects. And now, after copying pictures imported from Spain or imported from abroad, Filipinos have started to paint their actual and home or local fruits. And you can see here the lanzones and the atis and all of these tropical fruits. But with a Mersolo, the woman as a figure is very much associated with fruits and still lifes because the works of Amorsolo, if you know, is very much romanticization of the labor of farming and the labor or the issues of agricultural issues very much romanticized and given that kind of flavor. And we can see that the sumptuousness of fruit is much associated with the voluptuosity of women in much of Amorsolo's paintings. So puros yun na siya mga babae nga magdaog basket. So it kinda created a picture of a woman, a happy, domesticated woman with a basket of fruit. And then we go to Cebu. Still life painting in Cebu. For me, when I'm doing study now of Cebuano art history, and what I really found out is that the Cebuano art, we don't have a very much a mature tradition of still life painting compared to the other like Luzon, precisely because when Martino Abellana came back from Manila and started to teach painting in Cebu, their favorite subject is really outdoor scenes, and then their favorite hangout painting exercise would be the painting excursions to the countryside, to the beach, to the forests. And what was developed is a very strong tradition of Cebuano realism in landscape and seascape painting. And Martino Abellana, there's only a few documentation of his still life works, and sample works of Abellana's still lives would be this two paintings now in the Archbishop's Palace. And as you can see, these are beautiful pictures of flowers and vases, and you cannot really see some of the tropical fruits that's associated with the still lives of Amorsolo. Amorsolo was his teacher. But I want to focus into a very important contemporary Cebuano artist, Felix Catarata, who became, I think, the only Cebuano painter who focused on creating fruit paintings. And we can see some of his works here. And then you have the rambutan and the nangka, and then you have the manga, the balimbing. And then he started to copy and studied the composition of the Flemish painters. And you can see na instead of putting in tropical fruits and as colonial symbols of colonial power nga nakaabot ang Dutch dito sa Asia, dito sa South Africa, iyan ang gi-own ang atong own tropicality and depicted in his own works by embracing our local culture and putting it in his paintings, and still borrowing the idea of abundance, the idea of good life. And you can see some more of his works here. So nindot siya composition, makita nimo ang iyahang tradition nga gi-follow from the Western painters. But what I like with Catarata's work is that he wants to situate his fruit paintings in a much wider sociocultural perspective and context, which you can see in these paintings. So the lola, nagbantay sa iyang apo, ang apo nagkaon og pandesal nga naay kape or gatas, na maligya og lamas nga, and so still life is not is a scene not devoid of its context but expanding it to a sociocultural reality, which is unsa ang pagpaninda. Unlike ang Amorsolo, iyang gimask ang painting with very beautiful depiction of the countryside nga din akakakita ug unsa kahago ang pagpanguma. But here he wanted to expand the idea of painting into its actual context. Diri makita nato ang ginamos, ang dayok, ang mga gikan, mga abot sa dagat. And finally, this painting, I really like this painting because Catarata actually understands the role of art in society by unmasking the romanticism attached to Cebuano realism. Kanang atong favorite nga mga market scene, mga sinulog dancers, mga landscape paintings, very much shows a beautiful kind of life, but Catarata wants to question that depiction and wanted to put in the middle of his painting a still life of fruits and vegetables in the pursuit of progress, in the pursuit of educating the young. So murag, these are kids nga iyahang gi depict from the different schools in Bugo. And then kit Bugohanon man ni sa Katarata na niyang studio sa Bugo. And then in the middle of it is the still life of fruits and vegetables. Perhaps a good symbolism to how do we nourish our kids with food and how we should train them to become productive citizens. And I want to juxtapose the works of Catarata with contemporary women artists, contemporary painters. Beverly Catampo's Baybayon series. Beverly is a graduate from UP Cebu and comes from Daan Bantayan. And anak siya og mananagat ang ilahang community is a fishing community, and she wanted to pay tribute to that environment that she grew up in, and brought in the symbols and the things that you've seen while growing up in the coastal fishing community. And we can see that in her works here. Ang katong mga ingredients sa pagpangluto, ang asani kaning isda, ang tuno sa kinilaw, and all of this, ang talaba, sige, more. And then putting in some of the ingredients like bayabas, pepper, unsa pa may makita ninyo din ha. And then of course, mukaon ka og saging dito sa beach, and you can. So what I like with Beverly Catampo's work is that she wanted to create her own visual language with food, and a new idea of doing still life, a new way of doing still life, which I really admired because the tradition of still life painting is very much in place, and kind of a strong tradition that you have to master before you can actually become a good painter. But Beverly wanted to depart from that kind of standards and that kind of formula, and wanted to create her own way of doing still life. And finally, Riva Ingente's Buwad series. Riva is a granddaughter of Magbubuwad ug Magdadayok, and growing up as a kid, she would help her lola put salt sa buwad and to gather all the intestines of the isda, and to how to flavor it to become the dayok. And in her works, we can see how she understood, and she's very much familiar of the increased intricacy of buwad and how it looks like, and actually depicting it on found or discarded wood, and just trying to play around this idea of heritage, the idea of the wood being olden as the tradition and the heritage of food preservation in Buwad. Yes, and we can see finally, so the last slide. These are close-up in focus of pictures, textures of the dayok that you can see. In the battles, you can the patterns and the textures that you can see in the battles of the dayok. Okay. A recurring theme through history, food has been depicted as a celebration of a theme, composition itself, or a metaphor, whether serving symbolic purposes, being an allegory for certain virtues or values, or emphasizing exoticism or wealth. These food paintings were often used to reveal something else. Since food is interwoven with most aspects of our lives, this art history focused on food also connects with larger themes such as politics, gender, religion, or class. It's another lecture if we want to focus into these specifics: politics, gender, religion, or class. So thank you very much for giving me this overview of food and Cebuano culture. Thank you.